Iran released the strike footage. Western media went silent. Here's what they're hiding. At 11:14 on the evening of April 7th, the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting Corporation aired 47 seconds of unedited thermal imaging footage captured by an Iranian reconnaissance drone operating at an altitude of approximately 14,000 meters above the northern Negev desert. The footage, timestamped and geotagged by 3 independent open-source intelligence analysts within 90 minutes of broadcast, showed the sequential detonation of 8 K-4 ballistic missiles across the perimeter of Nevatim Air Base, Israel's most heavily defended military airfield, and the primary staging facility for its fleet of F-35I Adir stealth fighters. The impacts occurred over a span of 11 seconds. When the thermal signatures cleared, 4 of the 6 hardened aircraft shelters on the eastern apron were no longer intact. 2 additional strikes landed within 40 meters of the base's underground command coordination center, producing seismic signatures registered by monitoring stations in Jordan and Cyprus. Within 6 hours of the footage airing in Tehran, every major Western broadcast network had reported on the escalation in general terms. Not one aired the footage. Not one referenced the specific damage visible in the thermal imaging. And not one asked the question that the footage itself forces into the center of every strategic calculation now underway in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv. How did 8 warheads reach the most protected airfield in the Middle East without a single successful interception? Subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications before continuing. The pace at which the operational picture emerging from independently verified footage is diverging from official characterizations issued by Western defense ministries means that the gap between what is being said publicly and what can be confirmed visually is now wider than at any point since the conflict's first phase. When the next satellite imagery becomes available, when the next damage assessment leaks from within the Israeli defense establishment, when the insurance and logistics data begins reflecting what the footage already shows, this analysis cannot be missed. The channel documents what the footage reveals, what the official statements omit, and what the divergence between those two things means for the strategic and economic landscape affecting ordinary people thousands of miles from the blast radius. Subscribe now. To understand the full weight of what that 47 seconds of footage represents, it is first necessary to understand what Nevatim Air Base actually is within Israel's national security architecture, because this was not a strike against a generic military installation. It was a strike against the operational spine of Israel's most advanced offensive capability. Nevatim, located in the Negev desert approximately 45 kilometers southeast of Beersheba, serves as the home base for both 116 Squadron and 140 Squadron, the 2 units that operate Israel's entire fleet of approximately 50 F-35I Adir aircraft. These are not merely fighter jets. The F-35I represents the cornerstone of Israel's capacity to project force across the entire Middle Eastern theater, its ability to penetrate advanced air defense networks in Syria and Iran, and the delivery platform for its undeclared but universally acknowledged nuclear second strike capability. Nevatim also houses significant portions of Israel's airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance infrastructure, including ground control stations for the Heron TP strategic drone fleet and maintenance facilities for the Gulfstream G550 Nachshon Atom electronic warfare aircraft. The base processes more classified flight operations per year than any other Israeli Air Force facility. There is no backup. Nevatim, Ramon Air Base in the southern Negev, provides partial redundancy for conventional fighter operations, but it lacks the specialized maintenance hangars, weapon storage infrastructure, and hardened sheltering configured specifically for F-35 stealth coating preservation and avionics calibration. For the F-35I fleet, Nevatim is not one of several options. It is the only option that exists. That strategic context transforms the footage from a dramatic visual into an analytical crisis point. What the thermal imaging shows is not peripheral damage to auxiliary structures. Multiple independent analysts, including verified accounts affiliated with the Middlebury Institute of International Studies and the open-source intelligence collective GeoConfirmed, have assessed the footage frame by frame against known satellite imagery of Nevatim's layout. Their consensus, published across multiple platforms within 48 hours of the broadcast, identifies direct impacts on the Eastern Hardened Shelter Complex, the aircraft parking apron where F-35I units are positioned during maintenance cycling, and the fuel distribution junction connecting underground storage tanks to the flight line. The damage to the hardened shelters is particularly significant from a technical standpoint. These structures, built to NATO STANAG 2280 specifications and reinforced during a 2019 upgrade program funded partially through United States foreign military financing, were designed to withstand the blast overpressure generated by conventional warheads of up to 1,000 kilograms detonated at surface level. The Khaibar Shakan 4, however, does not detonate at surface level. According to assessments published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, this missile employs a maneuvering re-entry vehicle capable of terminal descent angle adjustment, allowing it to strike at near vertical trajectory. This means the warhead impacts the shelter roof at its structurally weakest orientation, rather than expending blast energy against reinforced lateral walls. The engineering implications are straightforward. A shelter rated for lateral blast resistance of a specific magnitude can be penetrated by a warhead delivering equivalent force at perpendicular angle to its least reinforced surface. The footage appears to confirm exactly this penetration geometry on at least 2 of the 4 damaged shelters. The defensive failure revealed by the footage demands technical examination that official statements have conspicuously avoided. Nevatim Air Base sits within the most layered integrated air defense architecture in the Middle East. The base is protected by at least 2 Iron Dome batteries providing short-range terminal defense, 1 David Sling battery designed specifically for medium-range ballistic missile interception, and falls within the engagement envelope of at least 1 Arrow 3 exo-atmospheric interceptor battery positioned to address long-range ballistic threats during their mid-course flight phase. Additionally, United States Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyers operating in the eastern Mediterranean provide supplementary Aegis ballistic missile defense capability through SM-3 interceptors. This is not a single defensive system. It is 4 overlapping systems designed to create redundant engagement opportunities against precisely the type of attack the footage documents. According to Israeli Defense Forces statements issued within 12 hours of the strike, the defensive systems performed successfully and the overwhelming majority of threats were neutralized. The footage tells a different story. 8 warheads reaching their targets means 8 warheads that transited through every layer of that defensive architecture without successful interception. The mathematics are unambiguous. If 12 missiles were launched, as Iranian state communications claimed, and 8 reached their targets, the interception rate across all defensive layers combined was 33%. If the actual salvo size was larger, which some analysts suggest based on launch signature data collected by commercial satellite operators, the interception rate may have been even lower. Either figure represents a catastrophic performance deficit for a defensive architecture that cost approximately $4.7 billion to develop, procure, and deploy over the past decade. The technical explanation for this failure centers on what defense analysts describe as the saturation mathematics of maneuvering re-entry vehicles. Traditional ballistic missile defense is designed around the principle of predicted impact point calculation. Radar systems track an incoming warhead, compute its ballistic trajectory, predict where it will land, and launch an interceptor to that predicted point. The interceptor does not chase the warhead, it arrives at the calculated intercept geometry ahead of the warhead and destroys it through kinetic collision or proximity detonation. A maneuvering re-entry vehicle defeats this architecture by altering its trajectory during the terminal descent phase after defensive systems have already committed interceptors to predicted impact points based on the warhead's earlier ballistic path. Each trajectory correction by the warhead invalidates the interceptor's flight solution, requiring either a new interceptor launch or an interceptor capable of sufficient terminal maneuverability to adjust. The Khaibar Shakan 4's re-entry vehicle, according to Iranian technical documentation displayed at the February 2025 defense exhibition in Isfahan and corroborated by analysis from Jane's Defense Weekly, is capable of executing lateral displacement maneuvers of up to 800 meters during the final 12 seconds of flight. At terminal velocities exceeding Mach 7, an 800-meter lateral shift renders most existing kinetic interceptors geometrically unable to adjust. They are traveling too fast on trajectories calculated for an impact point that no longer applies. The interceptors arrive at empty space. The warhead arrives at the target. If this channel is delivering the analysis this situation demands, the kind that examines mechanisms and evidence rather than repeating official characterizations, subscribe now and share this video with anyone attempting to understand what verified footage is revealing about the operational balance in this conflict. When the next commercial satellite pass over Nevatim generates high-resolution imagery that either confirms or contradicts what the thermal footage shows, the analysis will be here. When the insurance markets begin repricing risk based on demonstrated defensive capability rather than advertised specifications, the economic consequences will be documented here. The official framing and the evidentiary record are diverging at a pace that makes independent analysis not optional but essential. The silence from Western media organizations regarding the specific content of the footage is itself a data point that warrants examination. Within the first 24 hours following the Iranian broadcast, the footage was verified as authentic by multiple independent analysts using frame-by-frame geolocation, thermal signature consistency analysis, and cross-referencing with seismic data recorded by monitoring stations in neighboring countries. No credible analyst has disputed the footage's authenticity. Yet as of 72 hours after broadcast, no major Western television network had aired the footage itself. Coverage referenced an Iranian claim of a successful strike in generic terms. Coverage quoted Israeli defense officials stating that defensive operations were successful. Coverage did not show viewers the 47 seconds of thermal imaging that contradicts the official characterization and allow them to evaluate the evidence independently. This pattern is not new, but its current application carries specific consequences. When the evidentiary record is available, verified, and directly relevant to the credibility of official statements being reported as fact, the editorial decision not to present that evidence to audiences is itself a strategic communication choice with measurable effects on public understanding of the conflict's trajectory. The economic consequences of what the footage reveals have already begun propagating through financial systems with a speed that official silence cannot contain. The demonstrated vulnerability of Israel's most protected military infrastructure to Iranian ballistic missile attack has triggered immediate repricing across three critical economic sectors. First, aviation war risk insurance premiums for carriers operating into and out of Ben Gurion International Airport increased by approximately 340% within 48 hours of the strike footage's verification, according to data reported by Lloyd's of London market participants. Airlines operating narrow-body aircraft on European routes into Tel Aviv now face per-flight insurance surcharges exceeding $120,000, rendering multiple routes commercially non-viable. El Al has suspended 4 European routes and reduced frequency on 6 others. Second, sovereign credit default swap spreads on Israeli government debt widened by 87 basis points in the 72 hours following the footage broadcast, the largest 3-day move since October 2023. This widening translates directly into increased borrowing costs for the Israeli government at a moment when defense expenditure is consuming approximately 19% of GDP, roughly triple the pre-conflict baseline. Third, foreign direct investment commitment deferrals in the Israeli technology sector, reported by the Israel Innovation Authority, reached approximately $2.3 billion in the first quarter alone, with multinational corporations citing operational continuity concerns tied directly to demonstrated ballistic missile reach against critical infrastructure. These financial movements translate into household-level economic consequences that extend far beyond the conflict zone. Global crude oil futures rose 4.7% in the week following the footage release, driven not by supply disruption but by risk premium repricing as markets incorporated the demonstrated capability of Iranian precision strike against hardened targets located near critical energy infrastructure across the Gulf region. For the average American household consuming approximately 70 gallons of gasoline per month, this risk premium alone adds approximately $14 to $18 to monthly fuel expenditure. European natural gas futures, already elevated due to seasonal demand, increased an additional 11% as markets priced the possibility that demonstrated Iranian strike precision could be applied against LNG terminal infrastructure in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, facilities that supply approximately 31% of European natural gas imports. The cascading effect through food supply chains, where transportation fuel costs directly influence retail grocery pricing, adds an estimated $22 to $35 per month to the average Western household grocery expenditure. These are not speculative projections, they are the actuarial mathematics of war risk repricing propagating through interconnected global commodity markets, and they are verifiable in real time through publicly available futures contract data on the CME and IC exchanges. The broader strategic question that emerges from assembling all of these elements is the one that defense planners in Washington and allied capitals are now confronting with an urgency that official communications have not yet reflected. The demonstrated ability of Iranian ballistic missiles to penetrate demonstrate the most advanced integrated air defense architecture in the Middle East does not merely affect the Israel-Iran bilateral military balance. It fundamentally challenges the credibility of missile defense as a strategic concept across every theater where the United States and its allies rely on similar defensive architectures to deter adversarial missile capability. The Patriot PAC-3 systems deployed to protect United States military installations across the Gulf region operate on the same fundamental intercept geometry that the Khaibar-Shekan-4's maneuvering re-entry vehicle is designed to defeat. The terminal high-altitude area defense systems protecting critical facilities in South Korea and Guam face analogous challenges from Chinese DF-21D and DF-26 maneuvering warheads that employ similar terminal guidance and trajectory correction principles. What the footage from Nevatim reveals is not a localized Israeli defensive failure. It is an empirical demonstration that the foundational assumption underlying Western missile defense strategy that sufficiently layered defensive systems can reliably intercept ballistic missiles may no longer hold against current generation offensive technology. The implications extend to nuclear deterrence architecture, alliance credibility commitments, and the fundamental cost calculus that governs whether offensive missile capability or defensive interception capability holds the strategic advantage in 21st century conflict. The historical parallel is the emergence of precision-guided munitions in the 1991 Gulf War, which rendered an entire generation of Soviet-designed armor doctrine obsolete overnight. The question is whether maneuvering re-entry vehicles are doing the same to the generation of missile defense doctrine that has consumed over $300 billion in Western defense investment since the Strategic Defense Initiative's conceptual framework was first operationalized in the 1990s. Here is where the complete picture stands as of this analysis. Iranian reconnaissance drone footage verified by multiple independent analysts shows 8 ballistic missile impacts on the most heavily defended military airfield in the Middle East. Hardened aircraft shelters designed to withstand conventional blast were penetrated by warheads employing near-vertical terminal descent geometry. The integrated defensive architecture protecting the base, valued at approximately $4.7 billion, achieved an interception rate of 33% or less. Western media organizations in possession of verified footage have declined to broadcast it. Insurance markets, credit markets, and commodity markets have begun repricing risk at a pace that official statements cannot contain. Monthly household economic impact across Western economies is measurable in tens of dollars per family and climbing. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. When the commercial satellite imagery of Nevatim reaches sufficient resolution to confirm or challenge the thermal footage assessment, when the next actuarial cycle forces aviation insurers to publish updated war risk schedules, when the defense appropriations debates in Washington begin reflecting what the footage demonstrates about missile defense efficacy, the analysis will be here. Evidence first. What it means for the people watching always. One question remains before closing. Can the existing architecture of ballistic missile defense, built over 3 decades and funded at a cost exceeding $300 billion, keep pace with what maneuvering re-entry vehicle technology is demonstrating in real-time combat conditions, or is the world watching the foundational assumptions of strategic defense being tested beyond the limits they were designed to survive? Every response is read, every analytical contribution is considered. This is the channel.